Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm fond of saying it's always a great day to be in Guilford. And today it is even greater to be in Guilford with having the governor and his staff and so many representatives from state government here today to share the beauty of what we have in this community. Excuse me. I want to applaud the governor as well as the commissioner, DEP, Commissioner Dykes, for the work that they're doing on climate resilience. This is a community that has been and will continue to be significantly impacted by climate change. Several years ago, we adopted a coastal resilience plan, which included several significant initiatives, 3 of which were road elevation projects that we needed to do in order to preserve access and protect some of our most valuable neighborhoods in this community. So I want to thank the governor and the commissioner for the work they're doing on climate change. I want to make one point. Less than a half a mile from here, we have several $1 million worth of public works and park and rec equipment in a floodplain. So we are very, very concerned about what's going to happen, so much so to the point that we have purchased another piece of property sort of in the epicenter of town up off of Route 80, where we can hopefully eventually move that, because it is coming and it's only a matter of time. So again, thank you all for joining us here today, and I'm pleased to introduce DEP Commissioner Katie Dykes.
Well, thank you, First Selectman. It is a gorgeous day here in Guilford, and it's a really exciting day for the signing of Public Act 21-115. It's been a long road to get to this moment, and it makes that success of signing this historic legislation even sweeter. It starts in part with the Governor Lamont signing Executive Order 3 back in September of 2019, which expanded the Governor's Council on Climate Change, which had previously just been focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, to also include a focus on how we can protect our communities and invest in resilience projects in our state to help keep our communities safe and enable our communities to better withstand the impacts of climate change. Unfortunately, we know that the impacts of climate change are accelerating. But here in Connecticut, we know that this is our moment. We are cementing our legacy here for future generations in how we invest and how we prepare our communities to address and withstand these climate change impacts. So many of the folks gathered here today have been participants, members of the Governor's Council on Climate Change. For the first time, we had a working group specifically on financing climate adaptation and resilience. We have been pioneers and innovators here in our state in ways to create new tools for innovative financing with the Connecticut Green Bank, which has previously been focused just on reducing emissions. Now the Green Bank scope is expanded to include innovative and applying that innovative approach to investing in climate resilience and supporting other environmental services around the state. You'll hear the story here in Guilford. This is just one of many communities impacted by climate change, including storms like Superstorm Sandy. And we've seen Guilford be a leader in planning, using planning dollars that we got from Superstorm Sandy to create actionable plans for investments that can help prepare our communities. And now this bill, this Public Act, is helping us put our money behind those plans. Public Act 115 authorizes municipalities to establish municipal stormwater authorities that can help to address more frequent flooding and water pollution from stormwater runoff. And that will enable municipalities to raise revenue to invest in important resilience projects. It also adds flood prevention and climate resilience to the purview of municipal flood and erosion control boards, giving municipalities more tools to undertake climate resilience projects. As I mentioned, it expands the Green Bank to include an environmental infrastructure fund to finance climate adaptation and resilience projects. All of these things together are going to position Connecticut to receive federal funds through President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure framework and the proposed $27 billion Clean Energy and Sustainability Accelerator within the American Jobs Plan, modeled after the Connecticut Green Bank. It's going to take a lot of dollars to help protect our communities from the impacts of climate change. And the best way to do that, the dollars we really want to put to work, are federal dollars. And so this Public Act, we know that anytime we're talking about federal dollars, of course, the feds want us to have state and local matching funds. And they want us to have shovel-ready projects ready to go. And so this Public Act will ensure that we can have some of the components to raise those revenues for state and local matching funds. At the same time, this public act is coupled with a commitment in the bond authorization that was passed this year, $30 million that DEEP is going to be excited to help work to put on the street for municipalities to do that planning, to identify projects so that we'll be shovel ready and we'll be at the front of the line with this public act, with our plans, with our projects ready to go to tap into those federal funds to help keep our communities safe. So I want to thank everyone from the Governor's Council on Climate Change who's been a partner in getting us to this moment, and especially so many of our elected officials, our legislators who've been great champions. I know you'll hear from many of them today. But one of our great partners in the Governor's Council on Climate Change, of course, is Commissioner Andy Mays, who's been just a great visionary on helping to ensure that the insurance industry and our insurance policy here in the state is aligned around climate resilience and climate preparedness. And I want to turn the mic over to him. Commissioner Mays?
Thank you, Commissioner Dykes. I guess we all know that Connecticut is the insurance capital of the known universe. We've been trying to spread that far and wide. But one thing that we may not know is that as we look around at our coastal property, Connecticut has 66% of its total statewide property values in coastal property, which makes us second only to Florida. That tells you how important reining in climate change is. You know, to protect Connecticut communities from extreme weather events that are generated by climate change, we do need to make that investment in resilience. We have to have resilient infrastructure, and that is what this public act enables throughout this great state. It's also a social justice issue. We've seen so much research lately that underserved communities tend to be the ones most affected by climate change. And they are also the ones least able, usually, to financially deal with the consequences of climate change. Again, this public act enables the entire state to move forward. And I want to thank the governor, I want to thank the legislature, I want to thank Commissioner Dykes and the Governor's Council on Climate Change. Under this governor, we've seen so much progress. And now as we sign this act into law, I think it's going to be great to know that the 90+ degree days that we have here will remain. They should remain not the norm, but an aberration. If we don't address climate change now, that could change. And this is a way to address it, and we each must do our part. Commissioner Dykes had mentioned insurance, and as a regulator, certainly at the Connecticut Insurance Department, and I have a colleague of mine, George Bradner, who's been a leader in this, we've been working hard with our fellow regulators throughout the country. We've been one of 6 states that have required insurance companies to share their information with us on climate change every year through our task force on climate disclosures. And this year, the good news, and I'm really happy to say this year we did a real outreach program throughout the Northeast, and we've got 7 jurisdictions, 6 states, plus the District of Columbia that will join us. For us at the Connecticut Insurance Department, as we saw on the Governor's Council on Climate Change, this is holistic. It means working with everyone. Not working with our regulators, certainly means working with our insurers. We have to mitigate the damage that's already done and provide incentives to reduce damage that could happen in the future. It means working with stakeholders. And as you see, there are some very good friends of mine on the Council on Climate Change who have helped to share the message, to inform and to educate the people of the state so we can address the existential threat that is climate change. And I've got a daughter who occasionally listens to me, and I keep telling her, I say, Father and Mother would like to have a grandchild. Now, if she actually does it, if I have a grandchild, if I have grandchildren, one thing I want to be able to say to them is that we left here, we left this world, we made this a better place than I found it. When it comes to climate change, this governor has led the way, and this act as a great start, and I'm so proud to be here today. Thank you, and with that, let me introduce one of my friends from the Green Bank, the CEO, BRYAN GARCIA.
Thank you, Commissioner Mays. My remarks are going to be heavy in acknowledgments this afternoon and this morning. And I wanted to start off with thanking Governor Lamont. You know, we stand here at Jacobs Beach looking around, seeing the families and everybody running around, being together as a community. And, you know, Governor, I had the honor of catching up with some of your staff recently and just, you know, said on behalf of the Quasis, thank you for everything you all have done over the course of the past year to make all of our lives safer with what you've done on COVID. All the while growing our economy, you know, increasing, we're the fastest growing economy here in our state, or here in the country, and bringing the enthusiasm that you bring to the state of Connecticut and the Constitution state. That enthusiasm is infectious for public servants. It gets us all believing in the work that we do as public servants to make people's lives better here in our state. Achieving state budget surpluses, that's great. And then believing in the Green Bank. You've believed in us from the start, protecting us, and now expanding our mission. So I want to thank you, Governor, and the team. You know, Max, Paul, Mary, Megan, Jonathan, Ben, all of them. It takes a village really to build and have a great team around you to deliver what you do. I want to thank our legislative leaders, the Environment Committee, Senator Cohen, who I'm going to introduce here in a second, Representative GRESKO. Thank you. You know, this is the responsibility that we now have as a result of Public Act 21115 is intense, and you have entrusted in the Green Bank with us to raise and financing and funding to help us confront these challenges ahead of us. The Energy and Technology Committee, Senator Needleman, right here, Representative Arconti, you all have been with us for the last decade. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary as a Green Bank, and you all have been right there ensuring that we do what we can to mobilize more private investment in our green economy here in the state of Connecticut. So thank all of you at the respective committees. The Governor's Council on Climate Change, obviously, Commissioner DYKES and Dr. Rebecca French. You know, if de Tocqueville were around today, he would say democracy is alive in America. And what you did over the last year and a half by including stakeholders across this state to help inform and to advise the governor on what we can do to confront climate change was extraordinary. You know, in the context of COVID, in the context of holding online meetings, getting people to gather, it's really an extraordinary testament to what democracy can do in a time of crisis. So wanted to acknowledge you for that. OPM Secretary McCaw and Claire Coleman. Actually, Governor, was very instrumental in working the Green Bank within the bill as a recommendation on behalf of the Governor's Council on Climate. Obviously, our Insurance Commissioner Mays, George Bradner, I see over here. We're going to be close partners over the years ahead. The Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, CIRCA. I saw Joe McDougall here. Jim O'Donnell, John Trzynski, Connecticut Fund for the Environment. I saw Kurt Johnson's going to be saying some things. The Nature Conservancy, Audubon, Connecticut. I saw Rob LaFrance right here behind me. The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, the Council of Small Towns, the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, Connecticut Conservation Districts, and the Connecticut Forest and Park Association. Eric is behind us as well. So I want to thank all of you and more for being involved in the processes that really help identify the need for public policy to confront climate change. And of course, the Green Bank team, our chair, Lonnie Reed, is here with us. Lonnie is extraordinary. You all probably know Lonnie from this part of the state. She's brought an incredible creativity and look ahead in terms of what the Green Bank can do to broadening our mission, and has just been instrumental in advancing what we are doing as an organization. Our staff, Matt Masunas is here, Rudy's here, Brian Farnan, Bert Hunter, all the staff of the Green Bank. You are committed to public service and delivering upon the potential that public policy sees around us. Our vision is a planet protected by the love of humanity. It is fundamentally about us working together as people, loving each other, bonding with each other in the community. And when we do that, we will protect the environment in which we live. We will confront climate change. That is our mission. As I noted, it is our 10th anniversary. We began July 1st of 2011. Over this decade, we have invested $280 million of public resources to mobilize $1.5 billion of private investment in the green economy of Connecticut. That has helped support the creation of over 24,000 jobs in our communities, has helped generate nearly $100 million of tax revenues for our towns, has supported the deployment of nearly 500 megawatts of clean energy and saving 65 million MMBTUs of energy from energy efficiency projects in the state. That has reduced the energy burden, the energy costs on our families and businesses, especially the most vulnerable. Connecticut is known as a solar with justice state, and that means that our low to moderate income families in our communities of color, our Black and Hispanic families, are proportionately demanding solar PV more than non-low to moderate income families, and that is a testament to the public policy that has been set here in the state of Connecticut. In climate change, we've helped avoid nearly 9 million metric tons of CO2 emissions. So all of that investment in a green economy pays off when it comes to addressing climate. This is our 10th anniversary. With the passage of this bill, our scope now expands to include environmental infrastructure, which includes things like water, waste and recycling, agriculture, resiliency and adaptation, parks and recreation, land conservation, and other environmental markets. So you can see by the potential for applying the Green Bank model can really do to drive more investment in our state. You know, we've been getting used to things like, from heat waves to heat domes, from cold winters to polar vortexes, from downpours to rain bombs. Climate change is around us here today, and we need to enable more private investment in the things that have to happen to confront climate, especially as it impacts our vulnerable communities. So with that, I want to introduce Senator Cohen, who has been there from the start, who has been steadfast in her belief that this tool can, in fact, mobilize more private investment. And Senator Cohen.
Good morning, everybody. I first want to welcome you to my beautiful hometown of Guilford. I'll join First Selectman HOEY in doing that, and likely Representative Scanlon as well would want to send you a warm welcome for being here. Our environment and the Committee of Cognizance, I am the Senate Chair of the Environment Committee, have true friends in the Governor and the Commissioner of the DEEP, as is evidenced by this bill and is evidenced by this progression that we've seen starting with the Governor's Council on Climate Change and that Executive Order 3 early on. We are really recognizing the importance of resilience in light of climate change and sea level rise, and we are actually doing something about it, making Connecticut a leader in this regard. We have heard over and over again from bond rating agencies, from folks really shining a light on what municipalities, what states are doing across the nation to really shore up their coastlines and make sure that their inland communities are resilient. By enabling communities to create stormwater authorities, we're not only encouraging clean, less polluted surface water, but we are enabling our municipalities to have a funding mechanism to become more resilient and to really shore up our coastline. But as a legislator that represents both inland and shoreline communities, I can tell you that it is equally important for our inland towns to recognize the importance of planning and resilience. I see Circa here. They've been working so hard with all of our communities across the state, and hopefully with additional funding, we'll be able to work with them further to really get towns across the state of Connecticut prepared for storm surges and the like. We know that sea level is on the rise. We know that we have had long sustained periods of heat waves. We're about to enter another one now. And these are tools in the toolbox, if you will, to give to our towns across the state to really help them plan and become more resilient in light of climate change. the progression needs to continue. We need to continue the work that we're doing on these environmental matters. And I know, as I said, that the governor and the commissioner of DEP are true friends, making sure that we are making continual progress. The Green Bank expansion, we just heard from BRYAN GARCIA, who has been such a collaborative partner, primarily in renewables, and we're going to be really excited to have them as a collaborative partner moving forward to really help our towns plan, create funding mechanisms for infrastructure and the like. It makes perfect sense to enable them to provide dollars towards environmental infrastructure needs through the creation of dedicated funds. In 2019, I led the charge on creating the Climate Change and Coastal Resiliency Fund and investment options for our Connecticut municipalities. This year, we expanded upon it, and this bill goes even further to allow flood and erosion control boards to work collaboratively within their towns or within cross-town borders to really focus on resiliency as well. So I'm so grateful to be here today to witness this bill signing. So grateful for our environmental champions in the legislature. I see Representative Mushinsky behind us here, a consummate environmentalist, Representative Bohr, who started the session as my House co-chair on the Environment Committee and has been doing such great work in the legislature, and Christine Palm, Representative Palm, who's not here today, also a true environmental champion, and then my counterpart on the Energy and Technology Committee, Senator Needleman, who has really been helping to shepherd some of this legislation through. We just have a fantastic team of individuals who works collaboratively with the executive branch to really get these important proposals across the finish line. So thank you, Governor, for being a leader here, and Commissioner Dykes for your continued education on these important matters and really making sure that we're making these important advancements. And with that, I notably left out an important person in my thanks because I wanted to introduce him. He also a true environmental champion in the legislature and a wonderful partner for me on the Environment Committee, and I'm so glad to welcome Representative Joe GRESKO.
Thanks everybody for taking the time to come out on this beautiful Tuesday morning. I want to start off by saying thank you to the governor for his commitment to the environment. I can recall it, an event that he attended right at the beginning of his election, and if I can quote you, it was saying to look at everything through an environmental lens, and everyone here really appreciates that you have done that. The GC3 organization, thank you for all of the hard work that you've done over the years to push these environmental goals forward. I want to specifically thank some of my colleagues, Representative Bohr, who was the chair at the beginning of the session, but as the dominoes moved, so did everything else. And I also wanted to point out Save the Sound for their work, especially on the storm water portion of the bill. As you've heard, a tool in the toolbox, but it also gives municipalities local control of their futures and how they want to address stormwater. Again, Commissioner Dykes and James Albus making a cameo here today. Thank you for all of the calls that you took from us in the last waning moments of the session, and I want to specifically thank my Senate co-chair, Senator Cohen. she was very helpful to me during the last part of the session. As you probably can hear, it's been a challenge for me over the last couple of months, but we're working on it. But I just wanted to say that without her leadership, a lot of these bills would have not made it to the finish line. So thank you again for everyone coming here. And as far as next section goes, I'm sure we have a laundry list of bills being prepared. So thank you. And as I said, we're still working on it, but one of the things that we worked on last session was a Department of Agriculture bill that involved our shellfish industry. And one of the people that I was on the phone with quite often was Randy Collins from the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, who I will introduce next and thank for his work.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, we are so excited to be here today to see this piece of legislation signed into law. Truly want to thank the governor for his leadership on this issue. This has been a CCM priority for a number of years, but with his leadership and that of the legislature, the Environment Committee, Senator Cohen, Representative GRESKO, we're excited to see this put into place. The Stormwater Authority legislation is critical to meeting the requirements of the municipal stormwater permit. It will allow towns to generate revenue outside of a property tax, which will help alleviate that burden. Hopefully, as I said, reduce the need to raise a very aggressive property tax and to meet the requirements of this permit and go beyond that, not just for coastal towns, but for inland towns as well. So truly an important piece of legislation, and CCM is so thankful for, as I said, Commissioner DYKES and her staff and all the work that everybody has done on this bill. Truly want to give a shout to Bill Lucy, the soundkeeper, who's probably on the phone with me, talking me down on a very consistent basis. As I said, worked on this for about 5 years and had a lot of close runs. But he kept me grounded and kept my nose to the ground, so thank him very much. And also want to thank, as I said, Save the Sound and Kurt Johnson as well. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. You know, it's important just to pause every once in a while and celebrate. And I don't think we do that often enough. We did it over this weekend, but it is important to rest every once in a while and just thank everyone. I'll start really with Commissioner DYKES. You know, I want to thank you for bringing, about 65 of us together? I guess there were in total 300 of us working at GC3. It was a very, I think, good process of identifying a lot of priorities, and several of them are included in the bill that passed here that we're talking about today. I really want to thank the two co-chairs of Environment. You know, you guys. You know, my grandfather was wrong. My grandfather used to say that you go into politics and you never work another day in your life. You've heard that kind of crap before, right? You've all heard it. These people work tirelessly, and I'm looking at you, Mary, and everybody else. You all work tirelessly. I can't believe you're still standing. I think you'd still be in bed after that session. I'm serious. So thank you all for, hours and hours, I'm pointing out you two in particular. And thank you for recognizing Bill Lucy today, and Randy for mentioning that, and Randy for all your work on stormwater authorities. I did want to just say a couple of things about stormwater authorities, how important that is, how important that we're working with municipalities on this. It's going to allow a finance mechanism to do so much. Right now in New Haven, there's 200 rain gardens, either in construction, being identified. Save the Sound had a lot to do with getting that started. But it took dollars. It took, attention and hope. And now those 200 gardens are cooling neighborhoods. They're getting stormwater back into the ground where it belongs, not polluting the Mill River, not polluting New Haven Harbor. The same thing's happening down in Bridgeport. We need to allow that to happen everywhere. Like 1,000 points of green refuge for trees, for the environment, for protecting us from flooding. And finally, I'll just really add a big round of appreciation for all the work you all did to pass the $30 million in state bonding. That may not seem that important, but let me tell you why it is. The Commissioner already talked about it. Every state dollar we have is going to unleash another $3 or $4 of federal funds. If we didn't have that, the federal funds would fly over us up to Massachusetts or New Hampshire or down to Georgia or somewhere else. It's the only way we can capture those dollars. And let's talk about what it can do. If you look over here, beyond Jacobs Beach, there's a big marsh right there. It's eroding on the side. We need to rebuild the power of our marshes, the power of our dunes, the power of nature, working with engineers to protect the entire Seaside Street neighborhood here, right? That's the kind of work we can do. We can do it in New Haven. There's 3 major projects. I go back to what Commissioner Mays is saying about social equity, right? New Haven has 3 major projects. In New Haven Harbor, there's 2 or 3 in Bridgeport along the rivers. We need to be able to bring nature back, create trails so kids of any color, any background can enjoy nature and watch how it's protecting their neighborhoods. So finally, in conclusion, I just want to point out the man who got us all started, our governor, who, was foresighted enough to sign the executive order that got Katie moving and forced me out of my chair to work on GC3. And finally, I'll just say I look forward to working with everybody here, including the governor, to pass critical, leaving, things that remain, like the Transportation Climate Initiative, to stop the worst pollution from our biggest sector so that this beach is protected in the future. So, Governor Lamont, on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much.
All right, well, why not? It's an absolute pleasure to be here. For one thing, I live just over the water over there, so I'm a proud resident of Guilford, and it's so much fun to see, well, my neighbor, Senator Christine Cohen, but particularly an opportunity to personally thank the governor for his leadership on climate change and climate resilience. We know there's fires burning in the west. We know there's a historic drought there. We have a tropical storm so early in the hurricane season that's coming our way and going to hit Florida the next day or two. We're reminded that not only do we need to deal with climate change, but we also need to keep ourselves capable of adjusting and addressing climate change by keeping us safe today and adjusting to a changing climate that's already happening. So we are reminded by events occurring right now of the urgency of this legislation and your leadership, Governor, and your leadership in establishing the Governor's Council on Climate Change, the GC3, which you've been hearing about today. We at the Nature Conservancy were proud to be part of that process, and this bill that we're celebrating was a direct result of recommendations that came from the GC3. So I think also briefly to say that the Nature Conservancy, we've worked across 425 communities across 9 states and have heard from towns how important it is for them to have the tools that they need, because they're on the front lines quite literally, but they're also in our New England form of government, the governmental entities that have to organize and prepare for these changes that are coming. This bill helps them do that. You've heard about the stormwater authorities. You've heard about the Green Bank's incredible new role in climate resiliency, as well as we've heard about the ability that this bill helps towns with the flood and erosion control boards do a better job at addressing this. I won't go into a lot more detail about that, except to say that one of the examples of those projects we're talking about is right over here in Shinton Park. There's been a project in the works for a while. That's a perfect example of what we mean by what can we now do. Offshore reefs and marsh restoration, such as what Kurt was just speaking about over here, these are the steps that we can take to use nature to help make us more resilient. So these upland areas and properties will be better protected by using nature, and this bill will help us get to that kind of project. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today, and for me to feel a little safer in my own hometown. I also want to thank, because I have the floor right now, the members of the Connecticut legislature. Kurt was absolutely right in terms of the amazing work that they did on so many bills. The leaders of the Environment Committee, Senator Cohen and Representative GRESKO, amazing, and also here Mary Mashinsky and Senator Needleman from the Energy and Technology Committee, and I hope I'm not forgetting anyone else. But just, I too, like you, Kurt, was struck by just the level of dedication these folks have, and it's us all together, these folks, as to why we have this bill today. So am I able to introduce the governor? What a privilege. Governor Lamont, thank you so much.
Thank you. Beautifully said. Well, first of all, Matt, you maybe noticed it really wasn't all that tough when we said last week, who wants to go to the beach in Guilford on Wednesday morning, raise your hand in the sunshine. Everybody was raising their hand, right? And it is beautiful. We love being here, your hometown, Christine. But don't take it for granted. Don't take it for granted. I think that's one of the messages you hear. I mean, I see those kids over there. I was just listening when they were playing. I grew up on Long Island Sound, and you couldn't swim after a heavy rainstorm. Long Island Sound was pretty mucky anyway back in my day, but you couldn't swim after a heavy rainstorm. Don't take it for granted. You know, Lonnie was saying just, you know, big high tides now. Route 146, floods, and you can't get here, can't get from here to there. Don't take it for granted. You know, people talking about climate change and global warming. I don't think it does justice to what's happening. These are man-made events that are happening. It's accelerating every day, getting worse. Look what's going on. You go from Sandy to Irene. Remember Isaiah just last year? It's extraordinary, the risk we have in a lot of our, certainly our waterfront communities and more broadly than that. I talk to my fellow governors a fair amount, and I'm glad I'm in Connecticut. You know, I see the hell they're going through in California right now. I see that in terms of forest fires. I see that in terms of drought. I see that in terms of erosion. I talk to insurance guys who say, I'm not sure how much longer I can stay, you know, in environments like that. I see Florida. I see the storms coming in there. I see what's going on in terms of flooding. You know, somebody mentioned bonding. It's getting pretty expensive to bond places like that. And I'm proud that Connecticut is in a lot better shape. We're in a lot better shape because we've been thinking about this for a long time. We've been taking this seriously for a long time. Thank God we're a watershed area, so we're blessed with good fresh water as long as we take that seriously. Thankfully, our beaches, this one looks a little flat, but in other places, we have a little more elevation that gives us some confidence going forward, but not if we sit back on our haunches. One phrase I never liked was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think, you know, I come out of the world of entrepreneurship and start things up and always trying to do things better and better every day. And if you're not trying to do things better, some guy's going to lap you and you'll lose. And we've got to work every day to make sure that we treasure what we've got here. And that's what these bills were all about. You know, Brian mentioned how we're able to leverage our dollars with federal dollars, with private dollars, and really make sure that we have the resources we need to protect ourselves from flooding, protect ourselves from risk, protect ourselves from extraordinary risk. I mean, Katie was reminding me in the drive down here, we got within a few inches of losing a substation down in Bridgeport because of during Hurricane Sandy. You know, and Andy Mays points out that 2/3 of the value in this state is along the coastline. 2/3, that's residential, that's electric infrastructure, substations, a lot of commercial development. That's all at risk unless we pay attention to what we got to do. And when it comes to resilience, that means protecting ourselves from floods, protecting ourselves from, you know, Mother Nature's worst instincts. That means making sure that we're able to raise the roads, making sure we have the flood runoff as we need it, make sure we have the stormwater runoff going forward, making sure we're doing everything in terms of prevention. That means doing a better job every day, as Katie reminds us, of making sure our electric grid is carbon-free. Making sure that our transportation system is carbon-free. That's going to take a little bit longer now. These are all ways that Connecticut takes the lead. I want Connecticut to continue to take the lead on this. I think it's in our self-interest, and I think it's in the self-interest of the world. And I missed having folks in the building this past year. It was great to have our friends in the legislature. They've been amazing. Our legislative leaders are leaders when it comes to the environment. I greatly appreciate that. But when people are standing outside of the governor's office, I usually duck and run for the hills. But when there are kids there, they all bring up, number one, what do you do to make sure this planet in this state and my beach is safe for my kids as well? And these are 10-year-olds telling me this. It's just remarkable how if you think out a generation, this is our responsibility. I'm glad we're seizing the responsibility, and I'm ready to sign the bill. Thanks, everybody.
Beautiful brass pens. Matt, have one of our plastic ones.
Thank you.
You gotta take one home.
You get to take one. Thank you, Mary.
He's passing them around. All right.
Two more.
Dorinda, she's former chair. Yes.
Thank you.
James. My son needs one. Yeah.
Writing yet, James?
What's that?
Is he writing?
Oh, yes. 7 weeks you can write.
Thank you.
There we go.
I really believe that in 50 years, people are going to remember this is one of the most important bills you all passed this year. It really is. Couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're trying.
When can we expect this $30 million to be appropriated by the...
So we're just getting started with the planning effort to be able to implement the $30 million grant program. It's actually an expansion of the authorization for the microgrids program that we've been operating for about 8 years now. And so we're excited to get started. We're going to be working with municipalities to design the grant program. We're excited that CERCA was fully funded or got some additional funding. And they've been a great partner in helping to provide technical assistance and support to municipalities as well. So we're looking forward to probably the next few weeks having more details about the grant program that'll be ready to go.
Governor, so in the last few weeks, gasoline has gone up maybe 25 cents or more. So is this the booby prize for the TCI not sparking action in the legislature?
It's good to see Hunter Thompson's back in the room. Look, on the contrary, this is about resilience. This is about protecting our shoreline. This is about protecting Connecticut. If we had TCI, if we were able to get our transportation system all electric, that would be the best thing we could do long term going forward. In the meantime, we have some immediate needs right now on our coastline in particular. That's what this resilience bill is all about.
Well, how much of this money is going to be going to, are the shoreline towns going to have a leg up on this funding? I don't see
You want to
any
speak to that?
legislators here talking about what's happening in their city.
So we know that with the Governor's Council on Climate Change, the recommendations that came out around climate resilience planning emphasize the importance of, obviously, climate change is impacting every community around the state, not just shoreline towns. When you think about intense rainfall, towns just in the last week or two experienced some significant flooding, for example, inland in Enfield. So we're going to be looking to provide this grant funding all across the state. We also have a recommendation from the Governor's Council on Climate Change that 40% of our climate resilience planning funding should be focused on communities that are frontline communities that are vulnerable to of the impacts of climate change. That includes many of our environmental justice communities. You think about experiences of heat waves, for example, communities who lack affordable air conditioning, who are already suffering from air pollution and respiratory illnesses associated with our transportation sector, are more vulnerable to those impacts that are exacerbated from heat waves related to climate change. That's just one example of many, many examples of how climate change is exacerbating a lot of inequities and environmental vulnerabilities in our state. And that's why we're going to be thinking about that 40% benchmark commitment that was recommended by the Governor's Council on Climate Change as far as how we administer the $30 million in planning dollars. But that $30 million is just a down payment. That's the sort of administrative part of doing the planning to identify the projects, just like they've done here in Guilford. That gives us a sense of what are the projects that are going to be shovel ready and that we need to invest in. And then we go out and we're going to be looking for where are the dollars to actually invest in the project to support the project construction. That's where the municipal flood and erosion control boards, the expansion of the stormwater authorities can be great revenue raisers for local communities to fund these projects. We're also going to be looking to use the Green Bank and as well as ideally federal funds as much as possible. Hope that's helpful.
Governor, back to Hunter's question. With the TCI, I mean, is this going to cause you to double down on TCI? I think that's what he was trying to ask you about that. Double down on TCI for the next session is what I'm asking.
Look, I see that Transportation Climate Initiative passed at least one of the houses up in Rhode Island. It's moving forward in Massachusetts, Washington, D.C. Other states thought that Connecticut would be in a position to take the lead on this. This would have been a fee on petroleum for the petroleum middlemen out there. And we weren't able to get that passed, but it'll come up again.
And I'm also happy to add that today we're talking about investments to protect communities, right, for resilience, to protect from the impacts of climate change. But unless we take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the scale of investment, the climate change is going to be a runaway train, right? We have to address and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, or else we're never going to be able to afford the scale of investment that we'll need to keep our communities safe. So these are parallel priorities. The transportation sector, we're going to be issuing a report in the next few days, our annual emissions report. Just to preview, it's showing that transportation sector emissions continue to grow, greenhouse gas emissions. So we are going to continue to be looking at every mechanism, every opportunity that we can find to help address that.
Can we shift a little now, Governor? LA's noting an outbreak, and they're starting to talk about putting masks back on. How do you feel about that at this point?
The question is about Los Angeles requiring masks of folks indoors. Obviously, look, we have said wear your mask indoors, especially if you're not vaccinated, wear your mask indoors. That's something we're going to continue for the near term. The reason is that we've got close to 80% of our people vaccinated, but in some of our communities, it's a lot less than that. And those are communities that are at risk. Those are the communities at risk to something as contagious as the Delta variant. And we've seen that in Israel. We've seen that in parts of Europe. So we're being cautious. Thank God most of the time we're outside these days, and that's a really good thing.
Your powers are up on the 20th. Have you been in touch with legislative leaders on some kind of scheduling for a special session?
Yeah, my understanding is that sometime in the next week, the legislative leaders are going to convene with the legislature to propose a very narrow set of executive powers that can continue past the July 20th date.
And what are you going to need? What kind of powers do you want going forward?
I think very specific to public health, obviously. Number one, I like the fact that stores have the option to say, look, if you're not vaccinated, I want you to wear a mask. That might not be a practicality if we don't have the executive powers. I'm talking a lot to the vaccination folks to see what we might need in terms of boosters. That could be coming up, as soon as this fall. I want to make sure we're ready for that. I think you're going to see vaccines available to the youngest demographic. Right now, it's only for 12 and above. We got to make sure we're ready to be able to make sure those people are vaccinated I don't think it'll be in time for the school year, but soon thereafter.
Your office is negotiating with the legislature on this limited extension. So will you be issuing a new declaration, or will this legislation obviate the need for you to issue a declaration? Basically, do you have to issue another declaration, or are they just
Hopefully, if everybody here is on board, they'll continue the emergency powers in a very discrete set of EOs specifically related to imminent things on public health. So it's a narrow continuation going forward. Look, the emergency powers are also important so we continue to get full funding of FEMA. If you don't have those powers, we lose a lot of that federal funding.
That's how Max gets you to get going.
Is that it, Max? Let's see what's this.
Well, and also there's going to be a meeting, I believe, tomorrow between the House and at least the House and the House leadership on this issue of juvenile car thefts and how to handle cases where there may be juveniles who've been involved in multiple offenses. Where do you stand on that? Do you think we have it right in terms of the balance here?
No, I think the results show that this is true across the country in terms of this type of behavior. It's true in Connecticut as well. And these are folks who are carjacking, sometimes as part of a gang, sometimes as part of a joyride, often under the age of 18. And we're working very closely with the legislative leadership, very closely with Nora Danahy, our general counsel, very closely with the police chiefs to see what we can do to discourage this type of behavior. And justice delayed is justice denied. We got to be able to respond immediately and give people the right deterrence.
Do you anticipate that to be any kind of action taken in a special session in this regard, or do you think this is going to be something that's going to be
I will
discussed?
see, but I think there's a lot we can do with regulation. There's a lot we can do working with the municipalities. One thing that President Biden did do is say, look, in terms of the hundreds of millions of dollars you got in federal support for COVID-related, that can also go to law enforcement. That can go towards community alternatives, which would make a big difference for a lot of these kids.
Would you be in favor of changing the age in any way? We've the past 4, 5, 6, 7 years, we've talked a lot about changing the age instead of the whole concept of raising the age. Do you think the state has the age correct, or do you think it should be changed?
I'm not as worried about that. I am worried about, kids under the age of 18 who are breaking the law, sometimes, more than once, and finding the right response. Do I think it's incarceration? No, for that young kid. But I think there ought to be consequences for your actions. Thanks, everybody.